The desert wind carried memories like dust across the parched Arizona plains, and Jack Morgan had learned long ago that some memories refuse to stay buried. He stood on the porch of his weathered ranch house, watching the sun paint the mountains gold, when he saw her, a silhouette on horseback cresting the hill, backlit by the dying light. Something about the way she sat in the saddle, proud and purposeful, made his heart stutter in a way it hadn't in 16 years. Jack had spent those years trying to become a man worthy of the second chance he'd been given. At 34, his hands were calloused from honest work, his face lined from sun and wind, and his heart carried a weight that no amount of time seemed to lighten. The ranch he'd inherited from his father had become his sanctuary and his penance, a place where he could work until exhaustion silenced the questions that haunted his quieter moments. The rider drew closer, and Jack's breath caught. She was Apache, that much was clear from her features and the traditional turquoise jewelry that adorned her neck. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold, dark, intense, and filled with a recognition that seemed to reach across the years and grip his soul. "Jack Morgan," she said, her voice steady as she dismounted with fluid grace. "Do you remember me?" The question hung in the air between them like a prayer. Jack's mind raced backward through time, searching, until suddenly he was 21 again, reckless and full of the kind of stupid courage that comes from not yet understanding mortality. It had been a brutally hot July day, the kind that makes the earth shimmer and plays tricks on your mind. Jack had been out checking fence lines when he heard it, a cry so desperate and terrified that it bypassed his conscious mind and went straight to his instincts. He'd spurred his horse toward the sound, not thinking, just moving, and found a scene from his nightmares. 3 men, drunk and mean, had surrounded a small Apache girl, no more than 9 or 10 years old. She'd been gathering herbs near the canyon, far from the safety of her community, and they'd found her. The look in her eyes, pure terror mixed with a defiant refusal to beg, had ignited something primal in Jack's chest. "Leave her alone," he'd said, his voice carrying across the rocks. The men had turned, their leader, a snake of a human named Carson, had laughed. "This ain't your business, Morgan. We're just having some fun." "Fun's over," Jack had replied, his hand resting on his revolver. His father had taught him to shoot before he could write his name, and everyone in the county knew it. What happened next had unfolded in heartbeats but would replay in Jack's mind for years. Carson had reached for his own weapon, and Jack had been faster. The shot had echoed through the canyon like Judgment Day. Carson's companions had scattered like cockroaches in light, leaving their leader clutching his shoulder, alive but knowing how close he'd come to the alternative. Jack had turned to the girl, this tiny fierce creature who had watched the whole thing with eyes that seemed too old for her face. "You're safe now," he told her in the broken Apache he'd learned from their ranch hands. "I'll take you home." She hadn't said a word during the ride back to her community, but as he'd helped her down from his horse, she'd gripped his hand with surprising strength. "I will remember," she'd said in perfect English. "I will remember you, Jack Morgan. You gave me my life back. Someday, I will repay this debt." The Apache elders had been grateful but wary. Relations between their people and white ranchers were complicated at best. But they'd acknowledged what Jack had done, and one old man had placed a hand on Jack's shoulder and said something in Apache that Jack hadn't understood. Later, a ranch hand had translated, "The brave one has bound his fate to the child's." What is joined in blood and courage cannot be separated by time. Jack had thought it was just poetry, the kind of mystical talk he'd heard before. He'd ridden home feeling like a hero, young and invincible. But Carson and his family had power in the county, and within a week, Jack's father had sat him down with grave eyes. "Son, Carson's pressing charges. Says you tried to kill him. His family's got the sheriff in their pocket, and they're calling for your head." It should have been simple. Jack had saved a child, defended the innocent, done what any decent man would do. But the law, he learned, wasn't always about decency. It was about power and money and who had more of both. The Carsons wanted Jack gone, wanted to make an example of anyone who'd dare cross them. The trial had been a farce. But the Apache community had come, dozens of them, filling the courthouse. The girl's father had testified, describing his daughter's terror and Jack's courage. Other witnesses had stepped forward, including white ranchers who despised the Carsons' cruelty. In the end, Jack had been acquitted, but the Carsons' hatred had only grown. Jack's father had grown sick soon after, the stress eating at him. On his deathbed, he'd gripped Jack's hand. "You did the right thing, son. Don't ever doubt that. That girl's alive because you chose courage over cowardice. Whatever comes, you hold on to that." Jack had held on to it through the lonely years that followed, through the struggle to keep the ranch running, through the nights when he wondered if his father would still be alive if Jack had just ridden past that canyon. The Apache community had helped where they could, sending men to work during harvest, leaving food during the hardest winters. It was an unspoken alliance, a recognition of the debt and the bond. But he'd never seen the girl again. He'd heard she'd been sent away to a distant school, kept safe from the Carsons' lingering malice. Over time, she'd become almost mythical in his mind, a moment of clarity in his youth, a reminder that he'd once been capable of unhesitating goodness. Now, standing before him was a woman transformed. She couldn't be more than 25, but she carried herself with an authority that transcended age. Her dark hair was long and adorned with small beads that caught the fading light. She wore modern clothes, jeans and a simple shirt, but the silver and turquoise at her throat and wrists proclaimed her heritage with pride. Ayasha, Jack breathed, the name coming back to him like a forgotten song. Little Ayasha. She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Not so little anymore, Jack Morgan. I am Dr. Ayasha Naich now. I just finished my residency in pediatric medicine in Phoenix. I came back to serve my people, to give to them what was given to me, a second chance at life. Jack felt his throat tighten. A doctor. That's wonderful. Your family must be so proud. They are, she said, taking a step closer. But there's something I need to tell you. Something I've carried with me every single day since you rode into that canyon and changed the course of my life. The evening breeze picked up, carrying the scent of sage and creosote. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out to the rising moon. Jack waited, sensing that whatever came next would change everything, the way that day 16 years ago had changed everything. Ayasha's eyes held his, unwavering and full of something that made his heart pound. Jack Morgan, I came here to tell you that I am alive today because of your courage. I became a doctor because you showed me that one person's choice to act, to be brave, can alter the entire course of a life. Every child I save, every young girl I treat who's been hurt or scared, I do it because you did it for me first. She paused, and in that pause, Jack felt the weight of 16 years of wondering if he'd made the right choice, if the cost had been worth it, if that one moment of courage had mattered in the grand scheme of things. But that's not the only reason I came, Ayasha continued, her voice growing softer but somehow stronger. I came here to tell you something else. Something that might sound crazy, but it's the truest thing I've ever known. The stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, and Jack felt as if he were standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. Ayasha reached into her saddlebag and pulled out something wrapped in soft leather. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small carved figure, a horse and rider, meticulously crafted from dark wood. I made this when I was 12, she said, holding it up so Jack could see the detail in the carving. 3 years after you saved me. I was at boarding school in New Mexico, hundreds of miles from home, and I was so lonely I could barely breathe. The other kids didn't understand me. The teachers tried to make me forget who I was, where I came from. I wanted to give up, Jack. I wanted to run away or disappear or just stop trying. She traced the outline of the carved figure with her finger, her expression distant with memory. Then one night, I dreamed of you. Not of the rescue, but of something else. I dreamed of you standing on this very porch, and you were waiting. You were older, like you are now, and you were waiting for someone. In the dream, I knew, with absolute certainty, that you were waiting for me. When I woke up, I understood something that changed everything. Jack's mouth had gone dry. What did you understand? That you didn't just save my body that day in the canyon. You saved my soul. You showed me that the world, for all its cruelty and darkness, still had men like you in it. Men who would risk everything for a stranger, who would stand between evil and innocence without hesitation. I realized that if such men existed, then I had to become worthy of that sacrifice. I had to become someone who could stand beside such a person as an equal. She set the carved figure on the porch railing between them. So I studied. I fought through every moment of loneliness and confusion and pain. When other girls were dreaming of movie stars or boys from their hometowns, I was dreaming of becoming someone strong enough, capable enough, worthy enough to stand next to Jack Morgan and say, I am your equal now. The girl you saved has become a woman who can save others. Jack felt tears burning at the corners of his eyes. Ayasha, you don't owe me anything. What I did, any decent person would have done the same. She shook her head firmly. No, Jack. Most people would have ridden past. Most people would have told themselves it wasn't their problem, that getting involved would only bring trouble. You knew it would bring trouble, and you did it anyway. That's not common decency. That's heroism. And I've spent 16 years becoming someone worthy of that heroism. She took a deep breath, and Jack saw her hands trembling slightly. My grandmother told me something before I left for medical school. She said that among our people, there's an old tradition. When someone saves your life, truly saves it in a way that alters your destiny, a bond is formed that transcends ordinary understanding. It's not a debt that can be repaid with money or favors. It's a connection of souls. Jack's heart was thundering now. What are you saying? I'm saying that I fell in love with you when I was 9 years old, Jack Morgan. Not romantic love, I was too young for that. But I fell in love with your courage, your goodness, the strength of your character. And as I grew older, as I became a woman, that love transformed into something deeper and truer than anything I've ever known. She stepped closer, close enough that Jack could see the reflection of stars in her eyes. I know this must sound insane. I know you probably see me as that little girl you rescued, and maybe that's all I'll ever be to you. But I had to come here and tell you the truth. I came back to Arizona not just to serve my people, but to find you. I came here to tell you that if you'll have me, I want to spend my life beside you. I want to build something together, a life, a family, a legacy of courage and compassion. The silence that followed was profound. Jack's mind was reeling, trying to process what he was hearing. This beautiful, brilliant woman, a doctor, for God's sake, was standing on his porch telling him she wanted to marry him. It seemed impossible, like something from a fever dream. I'm just a rancher, he finally managed to say. I barely finished high school. I spend my days fixing fences and dealing with cattle. You're a doctor. You could have anyone. Someone educated, sophisticated, someone who could give you the life you deserve. Ayasha's laugh was soft but genuine. Jack, do you know what I see when I look at you? I see a man who stood against evil when he was barely more than a boy. I see someone who lost his father partly because he chose to do the right thing, and who never once complained about it or wished he'd made a different choice. I see a man who kept this ranch running through sheer determination, who treats his workers fairly, who's respected by everyone who knows him, even those who feared the Carson's wrath. She reached out and took his hand, and the touch sent electricity through Jack's entire body. I don't want sophisticated, Jack. I want real. I want true. I want a man whose word means something, whose courage isn't just for show. I want you. Jack looked down at their joined hands, her skin darker than his, smooth where his was calloused, small but strong. He thought about the 16 years that had passed, the twisting path that had led them both to this moment. He thought about his father's words, "You did the right thing, son. Don't ever doubt that." "I dreamed of you too," he admitted quietly. "Not like you dreamed of me, I didn't know it was you." But I'd dream of someone who understood, who knew what that day meant, who could look at me and see past the loneliness and the struggle. I'd wake up feeling like something important was missing from my life, like I was waiting for someone who might never come. He lifted his eyes to meet hers. Are you sure about this, Ayasha? Once you say yes to this life, there's no going back to the city, to the comfort and recognition you've earned. This ranch is beautiful, but it's hard work and isolation. The nearest town barely accepts me, and we'd face prejudice from both sides. Your people might not understand. Mine certainly won't. We'd be building something new, something that doesn't fit into anyone's neat categories. Her smile was radiant, fierce, and absolutely certain. Jack Morgan, my ancestors survived forced marches and broken treaties. Your ancestors survived crossing deserts and building lives from nothing. We come from survivors, from people who refused to give up even when everything seemed lost. I think we can handle some small-minded prejudice, don't you? Jack felt something break open in his chest, something that had been locked and frozen for 16 years. It felt like hope, like possibility, like the future suddenly expanding into something bright and real. Then yes, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, Ayasha. I'd be honored to have you as my wife, to build a life together, to stand beside you as you stood beside me in spirit all these years. She stepped into his arms then, and Jack held her like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. Over her shoulder, he could see the desert stretching out endlessly, the same desert that had witnessed their first meeting, that had held their separate sorrows and hopes all these years. We'll build a clinic, Ayasha murmured against his chest. Right here on the ranch. A place where anyone can come for help, regardless of who they are or whether they can pay. We'll make this ranch a sanctuary, a place that proves different worlds can come together and create something beautiful. Jack pressed his lips to her hair, breathing in the scent of sage and something uniquely her. We'll need horses, he said, surprising himself with a laugh. Lots of horses. So we can teach kids to ride, give them the freedom and strength that comes from it. And a garden, she added, pulling back to look at him with eyes full of dreams. Where we can grow healing herbs, where children can learn about the earth and what it provides. They stood there planning their future as the stars wheeled overhead, two people who had been connected by a single moment of courage 16 years ago, now binding their lives together with choice and love and an unshakable faith in what they could build together. The cowboy and the Apache girl he'd rescued were gone, replaced by a man and woman who had earned their happiness through years of struggle and growth. But the courage that had brought them together remained, transformed now into something even stronger, the courage to love across all boundaries, to build a life that honored both their pasts and promised hope for the future. When they finally kissed, it felt like a promise being kept, like the universe itself had been holding its breath waiting for this moment. And in the desert night, where the wind carried the whispers of ancestors and the hopes of children yet to come, their love became a beacon, proof that one act of courage, one choice to stand against darkness, can ripple forward through time and create miracles.